All right, hello and welcome to episode 111 of the Low-Code Campfire. This is the episode for Friday, August 18, 2023. I am your host, Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantain App. Patrick Anderson will be joining momentarily. He's technical support manager. And this is our opportunity weekly to get together and talk about Plantain App in general and low-code in specific. Or maybe that's the other way around. Anyway, this is an all skill levels welcome meeting, and it's a good opportunity to show and tell and bring ideas and suggestions. All these episodes are recorded on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/plantainapp, so do subscribe to that. We'll run this agenda where we introduce and say hello, and then we'll go around the campfire and do some or all of these, but we always do first call. So if you have something on your mind, that's your chance to jump in and talk about it. But do jump in, show and tell. This is a meeting format and we're pretty informal. We do ask that you mute if you've got noise going on behind you. And other than that, this is just a very courteous group. You can submit questions and topics in advance. That's in the there's a link for that in the emails that we send to you, but also this QR code will get you there for that. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning. It looked for a moment there like it was going to be the Don Gingold hour.
But before that, it looked like
I'm ready.
It looked like a chance for Patrick and I to have a chat. which we haven't done in a week or so, so that would have been just fine.
I hope you enjoyed your time away. I understand you took a little vacation time.
Yes, I did.
Wonderful. Looking forward to doing that someday.
It is nice.
I do have something. I hope it won't dominate the whole time, but I think it's helpful for everybody, and that is working with time, timey-wimey problem, as Doctor Who would say. I've got a form that is supposed to display a time, a date and a time, and it's displaying UTC or Greenwich or whatever that is universally called. It's showing that, and I can't get it to show my own time zone. I start by saving, letting somebody pick a time in one form, and then that gets written out to a record, and then I pull that record in on another form and display it. And that's where the problem is. Dale and I were talking back and forth, showed me a technique for formatting the time, which is great, but it formats it and then puts it out, and it puts it out in universal time, and I can't figure out how to get it to my own time zone. So that would be very helpful if you could help me through that.
Well, there are ideas on the subject, and I'd love to jump in. We can kick this one around a little bit, and this is the spot where I throw Patrick under the bus and just say, "Well, Patrick's our time expert."
Oh, really? I don't actually. I think honestly, I don't think there is a time expert. It's so complex that it baffles. I think probably even Ben.
Well, what you have to establish first
it
is
has
it
for a long time, but that's why I've created a lot of things to do it for me now.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing you have to do. It's so challenging.
well, I think we have to establish first of all, is it absolute or relative? Once we do that, we can get a beat on it.
Right. Yeah.
How
That's
close are we to the
Go ahead.
What's your
No, go ahead.
elevation, Don?
No, but you made a very good point, Matt. It depends also like what is the field type that you're using to store your date in.
It's a date time field, whatever that means. I'm in the entity builder in Plantain App, and I select a date time.
So here's the thing. Well, no, I'm talking about in your database. What is the field type?
This is a low code talk, right?
Well, it's
okay, you're using Plantain App to do the entity?
Yes, I'm using Plantain
Are
app,
you
create
are you
entity.
using the datetime, or are you using datetime? What is it? Datetime local?
Right. Daytime local is the other one. Yep.
Which
Yeah,
one are
the
you
local
using?
There's a
server.
different, oh geez, I didn't see that
Yes.
there was the
If
second.
you use the regular datetime, it's not going to be storing the time zone information. If you use the
Right.
datetime local, it will store the time zone information.
Oh,
So here's the thing. If you use regular datetime, you're making an assumption as to what the time zone is going to be. And then it's up to you to move it, back and forth to different time zones. If you use datetime local, it's
Yep.
going to store the data into the default time zone of whatever your SQL Server is. And then all you have to do at that point is move to a different time zone. And a lot of the built-in functionality in Plantain app will help you do that with regards to especially like grids. When you're pulling out the data, you can format the column to say either to the time zone of the portal or to the time zone of the user that's currently logged in.
okay, that's very interesting. So the question, first of all, I didn't know that there was, and there it is. I'm looking at my screen. I'm looking at the entity builder and see that there is a local date and time. So that leads me to a second question. Can you just, you can't just go in and go into the entity screen, edit the entity, and change the type, because that's not supported. So I can delete that and then add using the same name. Will that work?
Well,
Will
there's a
that,
better, if you have data you need to save, you should add your new data type first, and then update the new property with your saved data, and then delete
Right.
the extraneous column.
Yep.
But if it's
okay.
brand new, you can, I mean, if you don't have good data yet, then you can
Right,
add,
right. At this point,
delete the old
there's,
column. Mhm.
yeah. So that's the beauty of this is it's one record. The manager is going to set a date. It's basically a published date if you think of it that way. In any article in the article system or edit news system, where you want to publish an article, you want to know what the published date is. So that's what it's going to show. And I want to show an error when it's too early and tell them, no, it's going to be, this form is going to be available as of, and then show the date and time that's in that field. So that's why I'd like it to be local and not 5-6 hours off. So so that makes sense. So I could just delete that record and create a local record, and then it's going to using the little routine to format the time. The time is going to be stored locally, local to the SQL Server, which is also set for the time zone of the site. Luckily, it's a site that's what's the word? Only people in the region are going to be using it, so it's always going to be that time zone, so it's not a problem. Cool. That solves the problem. Thank you.
And just a moment ago, you were talking about, we're talking about low code, and we're talking about Plantain app property types. And I just put a link in the chat to that shows you what kind of database field is created when you add a specific Plantain app property type. So that's a handy reference to go to in case you want to know what the database field type is that's created.
Yes, indeed.
So it's the table just below where on the link I sent.
Yeah, perfect. That's helpful.
We all kind of laughed when you brought that up, Don, because it is, I mean, it is difficult. And if you think that you have it, you just don't know enough yet.
I've always said
10-4.
date times are the bane, I think, of any programmer's existence. As soon as date time fields start coming into play, I roll my eyes and I start groaning. I'm like, and here we go. Because every single language uses a different format, a different structure, different rules. Then when you start talking time zones, that
time zones are listed differently.
Another level of annoyance.
Yeah.
one of the ones that another one that comes into play is the whole daylight savings time episode.
Yeah.
And so, for example, you can pick out a date that is a date and time on using a daytime control today, and it says 3 in the afternoon, and then store that away in a database, and then you're looking at it 4 months from now after a time change, and it's shifted by an hour. So from because of from a time zone standpoint, it's trying to nail it down to a particular point in time, and you might be thinking about it differently than it does. So there isn't easy if you're really trying to do worldwide data.
But also this highlights though why it is so why date and times are so often stored in UTC, because UTC doesn't have daylight savings time. So right. You can store a value in UTC, and then when you go to convert it to a specific time zone, then you look at the daylight savings status of that time zone. If you so it's for that specific date, and so storing in UTC is really it's almost always the way you want to go.
I agree, Patrick. You beat me to it, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, in situations with DST, definitely a lot of people, what they did, especially if you're using date time field that doesn't store time zone information, you store the data in UTC and then do the conversion from there. However, that being said, it also adds a level of complexity, because if you ever look at the data table directly, the date time that's listed is not what you think it is. It's not your time zone, it's UTC. Then you have to then manually do the conversion or figure it out in your head what the difference is, which is one of the reasons why doing the date time local now is so useful, because built into that time portion is the time zone info as well. So it takes one piece of that out of the equation, so you could still see the data in your time zone, but if you need to convert it, now you know what your starting time zone is, and figure out the conversion from there.
Good. So that means that using the local date and time type in the Plan and App entity builder will deal with the problem, and I don't have to worry about when they're looking at this form and when that pops up, and if daylight savings time is in place at the time and all of that. Although I think Illinois just decided to not do daylight savings time anymore.
You have to be careful with that statement. It can take care of it. It by default won't. You have to be sure that you handle it. Specifically, like in grids, you have to say you want to format this as a date time, and what time zone do you want it to display as? Do you want it to display as the portal time zone or the user? If you don't do that, it's just going to default it to whatever the data is.
Yeah.
So like if you want it to default it to the user's time zone, you have to be sure you tell it to do that. It's not just going to do that by default.
He's got a one time zone scenario, which does lower the.
So in my case, just the portal is
simplifies it.
It does simplify it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. For now, until you wind up with a user that's in a different time zone.
It'll be dang.
Just don't allow them in. Just don't let them register.
Well, the easiest thing is where I format it, after the format, I'll just put CST or Chicago time, or wherever they are. In this case, they're Springfield, but it's Springfield time, and then leave it at that. There is the possibility that somebody from, another state will be looking at this form because the form is for residents of the county that is going to the form, but they could be on vacation. They could be anywhere else. That's true. But what's important
they'll be comfortable to think of it.
They'll understand that it's, it's the time zone of the county, if I state that at the end, which is probably the easiest thing to do. But that really does solve the problem in the local, switching it to local date and time, and I'll play with that. And then that cool little formatting token that you gave me works wonders. Thanks very much.
Lovely.
So did you say this was for a voter registration system?
Vote by mail, yes. So you can.
They could be from anywhere. I'd work on your time zones.
Well, it's local. It's for
I'm just
county.
kidding with
so
you.
yeah, it's not.
I'm
I
just
mean,
kidding.
it's not federal level. It's county level. So they'll only be there locally. So that'll be yeah.
Yeah,
And
I just know that I had a similar situation as you, Don, where all of my users, well, I assumed all of my users would be from my state. So I was not dealing with time zones, just putting in date and time flat out, and ended up that over the course of a few years, all of a sudden we started getting consultants, and the consultants were in a different state, in a different time zone, and they were adding things in, and they were putting in their, hour and minute or whatever for whatever needed to be done. And then of course it was off by hours. And once I came to that, people are like, well, why is this triggering when it's not supposed to trigger for like another 4 hours or 3 hours? And it's like, because that person was in California and they used their time when they put it in. So it triggered 3 hours late. So, that's where it became a big issue. But in the very beginning, I was like, oh, just use the local time zone because we'll never use anybody else's time zone. And then it bit me later, not realizing, well, yep, I didn't ever think that this scenario would come up.
Luckily, this doesn't have all of those things. It's simply when is this going to launch? And frankly, it's probably going to be set for 12:01 a.m. But because of the UTC thing and not knowing the current time zone, it was showing that telling people this form is not going to show until 5:01 a.m., which seemed weird. And I didn't want to hard code it for her. I wanted it to be a particular time that she'd have to turn it on. So if she wanted it to be at 8 a.m. or if she wanted to be some other time like that, where it's available for people, that she could do that. The clerk could do that. Rather than just saying that, pick a date, just the date would be enough. And it means 12:01 a.m. on that date when it's displayed. So that's the only reason why I'm doing it. So it's a minor part of the form, but it's one of those things that, you get this message pops up and they said, why is it that time? I've set it for this other time. And so it has to be right, even though it's a minor thing. And I went through Y2K, so I know all about time problems and date problems and all of that. But this one here is it's again, I've said this many times. You just got to know the language. Yeah, there's a function for it. If you understand what the language is, you could do it.
So good. Let's go on to issue number 2. Who has another first call?
I have I think it's a first call. Basically, if you recall, I sent you an email, Dale, regarding this. Basically, what I want to do is try to center a header in a grid. So I'm just trying to use the alignment capability of HTML5, and it's not working. So maybe me, maybe a bug, maybe technique, probably me. So in the additional HTML header, I've got like an H3 style equals quote unquote text dash align colon center test header. Tried a bunch of variations and nothing centers it. Anybody else seen this?
So for clarity, you are talking about in the listing settings under advanced UI settings, the additional HTML header. Okay.
Yep. I just put it in what I'm using now. This in some of the other documentation, it refers back to Bootstrap 3 or 4, which has been deprecated, I think. But anyway, no, I'm referring to something else. But anyway, for this, it's not working. So the larger question is there a way to center the additional HTML header on a grid without jumping through too many hoops?
So Matt, that's going to center within the container in which it is living.
Mhm.
So if that's in a div, let's say, the div needs to be full width or 100%,
It is.
and
Yes.
then it might
Yeah.
work better.
Well, so the grid itself is a full width grid. So
Well,
recognizing that,
That
I'm
helps.
assuming then, yeah,
But
the
let's
div is,
investigate.
I think what you might want to try to do is use CSS to assign the style to the H3 within maybe even use a class assignment for the grid so that you're not messing up your H3. But because what I'm noticing is that I put your code in and
Yeah.
and the style's actually not there. So it's just that your text line center is just not there. So I think that what you need to do is use CSS to put a
Patrick,
class on there.
it's happening again. I always get ignored, no matter what. Okay, so it's basically just not bothering with that. I was interested because, well, if it's picking up the H3, so it's paying attention to something, but evidently not. Okay.
I inspected it and saw that the style's not there. So probably want to use
Yeah.
a class.
I wasn't sure if it was me or the formatting. Go ahead, Dale, sorry.
I'm sorry. For those of us who are slow, where is this?
Under the settings tab at the top, and then scroll down to the advanced UI settings. And it's the first setting there.
And so this is hoping the purpose of this would be to put a.
Yeah, so what I did was just copied and pasted what Matt put in the chat, and I pasted it in there for mine.
And so some of this is rendering, but some of it isn't.
Well, the H3 is there, but but if you inspect it and look at that style's not there.
So it's stripping out the style.
Yeah.
And what would it?
So it's there at the very top, right below your breadcrumb. Yeah.
I see. And so we would hope that this is a the purpose of this. You're just trying to put in one big header centered over the top of your grid.
Right.
Okay. All right. I thought we were trying to do something at the column level and got confused. So
Quick question. Yeah. Have you tried using the Bootstrap 5 class instead of style?
That would be a good idea. Yep.
Do tell. The answer is no.
Erase the style and then put in class equals text hyphen center.
Oh,
or text equals quote text hyphen center. That's the Bootstrap 5 class for centering. Maybe
actually,
that might work.
I think I have tried that one, but I'll give it another try right now. All right, what is it again, Ben?
The class is text hyphen center. I believe. Let me just double check.
Yeah.
Yeah, text hyphen center. Yep. I'm just curious if it would accept the class over. Yep,
Whoa.
it does.
Yeah.
Nice. Sure. All right.
You're welcome.
You know what? So on a related note, I implemented that sticky top header that we were talking about, I think, last week. Works like a champ.
I
It's
love it.
great. Yeah.
I think, Patrick, you were playing with flipping our SQL results and things that are low code.
Yeah,
into
I
that.
did.
So that may be coming soon. 'Cause of course
Actually, in a minute here, if you want, we can take a look so can get you guys' opinion on it.
yeah, when this list is very long, it scrolls to the bottom of the page. It's really quite enough. If you want to bring it up and when you have it,
Yeah, I'm ready.
You are great. Let's do that. So I managed to show you the old way. Patrick will get his version built into the product and we'll roll it out that way for a future one.
We can just find the Zoom meeting. There we go.
I remember, particularly when I started doing this, I would lose the Zoom bar, and man, that's uncomfortable.
So, there's a couple things that really was frustrating me beyond the fact that, here's the one thing that Dale was saying is that, okay, so if I have a bunch of results, I have to just keep on scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and then I lose this. And so, that's one thing I did was put the results inside a scrollable area and with the sticky header, so you can keep that. But I also put this so that you can play with the. I made it so you can play with the size of the box. So I enabled the whatever this is called. I forget what it's called now. I'm blanking on it. I'll blame Vacation Head. But so that I did that, and then, but also one of the things that's frustrated me about this page is that when you have a lot of entities, if this is really handy that we have this ability to be able to copy things and paste it over here. But then if you scroll the available entities, then, if your available entity is way, down here, and then you have to scroll all the way back to the top of the page to paste that where it is. So I thought it made sense to put the available entities into a scrollable box as well. So that way, anywhere I am. So if I'm working with this table right here, and so I just copied the table name, I'll paste that over there, and then now I can copy a column name and paste it over here, and then I can write my SQL. So I just feel like that this is a lot more useful to keep these over here like this. So any thoughts? I mean, be critical. I don't care. Just let me know. I know it doesn't look. I struggle with that because I think the look of scrollable boxes is kind of ugly, but it's more utilitarian. It's useful. So
Those are good changes.
100% agree. Like you said, it may not be totally visually aesthetic, but utility-wise, I agree. When you have a situation that's really long, it's a heck of a lot better because you're basically always going to see the SQL box.
Yeah, right. And that's what I was going for, is that this is what the page is all about right here, right? And so we want to be able to see it. And it does have it does have a little bit of scrolling, but not a ton. And if you want to see more of these results and you want the page to scroll, you have that option. You can grab it and expand the box.
Very nice, Patrick.
Yeah, that's good. Like it.
That's good. Next on his list is export, copy, and paste.
Export, copy, and paste. What exactly?
When you do an export of like a control or something, the pop-up window that comes up is never in the center of your window.
Oh, yeah. That bothers me too. That's not
low code.
Yeah, that's not me.
I thought maybe you might be referring to exporting data from here, like the result set.
Yeah, and that's here. So we have that. The only thing that I don't think is ideal about this, but there's not a lot of ways around it, but this runs the query again. So this isn't actually taking the results right here and exporting it. So in fact, I have a bad query here. So if I click this again, that error should be at the top. I messed
Mhm.
something up.
Yeah.
Because this is the one of the things I fixed in a previous iteration, that this error is at
Needs
the
to stay very connected to the SQL box.
yeah, it should be right here. So I need to check that out because that should be fixed in a later version. This right here should be above. Anyway, yeah. But anyway, that illustrates the fact that if I click either of these, it reruns the query. Now, if I correct my query here and just make it now, if I do CSV, you can see I got a downloaded file here.
So Patrick, if this is, hopefully this is fresh enough on your mind, can you dig in and tell us where that stretchy corner functionality, how that gets enabled? Can you find it, or is that too much?
No, I think I can.
Finding it, this, making this, making our features be more low code is for the ones that it makes sense to do. It's our goal to do that because then it does open up, more people can work on, and it looks more like the rest of the results of our product. So
This is going back a couple weeks now, so just bear with me. I think I put a class on here, didn't I?
This
Check.
before or after vacation head?
I did this before vacation, so I have to think back to that.
Happen to be table responsive, would it?
Yeah, I just need to remember where I put the CSS. A result table CSS. Hey, look at that. That was easy. Let's see.
Resize both.
Yeah, resize both. That's it right there. Yep. So that's and then for the resize vertical is what I did for the entity list.
Mm-hmm.
So the entity list can be resized vertically, but the result table can be resized both ways.
Nice. So much to learn. Okay, any more questions on that one? Or any other first call? I have as always, something in my back pocket, but I would definitely
a follow-up to what we talked about at the beginning here with the time, which I thought the local time would solve the issue, but that that reformat token that you gave me apparently doesn't like local time, local date and time. What I did was in that little management record, I changed the fields to be local date and time fields instead of the date and time field. When I had it as a date and time field, the reformat routine worked. It just gave me UTC as opposed to my own time zone. When I made them the local date and time parameters and then use the reformat token, it gives an error saying that conversion failed when converting date or time from the character string, and the cast statement apparently it doesn't like that format. So I'm going to have to edit that, or
yeah, so I shared with Donna a token that does SQL, takes an input and two inputs, a date and time, as well as a format string, a normal Microsoft style MMDDYY kind of format string, and just throws that at SQL and lets it do the work of creating whatever dynamic format he wants. But apparently that token has the limitation that it's expecting it's not converting whatever into a date well, and so that piece of the puzzle I don't on the fly have the answer for how to make that piece work now.
So in general, not using that token, that's fine. I would like to understand it in general. I mean, I appreciate when you've got a little widget that you can grab and use. But again, that also kind of hides what's actually going on. So it'd be helpful for me and maybe, anyone else watching to have a better understanding of how one formats a time in the product. When you do a read, for instance, like when the form launches in the events under pre-init, I go and read a record. When I read the record, I'm using the action of reading the named record. So it's your entity read action. So that pulls it into a variable, and the variable, show as of is the variable, and that's the local date and time. So what do you do then? Do you do a create or update token right underneath it and do a SQL cast to it, or do you do a SQL query underneath it and do a SQL cast to create the nice format? I'd like to turn the date into Tuesday, March 19th, 2024, as opposed to 03/19, the format that it's stored as. So in general, is that the technique that you should use if you don't have magic tokens and stuff?
I feel like I'd have to see the implementation to really dive into that.
If I understand what you're saying, Don, the read is going to bring back the date as a date time offset, which is basically what the date time local is. It's a field type of a date time offset. The easiest implementation would be that I could think of would be as you suggested, is right underneath the read, open up an action for a SQL query, pass that date time, that's as a date time offset. You want to cast that then as a date time, and not cast, convert. You want to convert that as a date time, because the convert T-SQL command has an additional option where you can convert it to different varchar styles. So it would be convert varchar, your date time, and then a number value. That number value is going to equate to different formatting styles. And you want to pick the style that you're looking for. You'll find that in T-SQL documentation. Just type in Google T-SQL convert, and it'll pull it up right quickly on the Microsoft website.
Got it. So that's the answer, is to read it in, but then you got to do the convert. So that's a SQL action. And the output of that action is going to be the token that's holding the string that I'm going to display. So there's some static text at the top. Actually, in this case, it's an error message. So in the error message text, I'll drop that token in that I've just converted in the previous action.
Right. Like I said, that'll be the down and dirty quick way of doing it. I mean, could you create a my token to do the same thing? It's possible, especially if you did it as a Razor script of some sort. Efficiency wise, it should be better, because then it'd be running strictly on the IIS server without having to contact the SQL server. But if you just want to leverage what's already there, with as little additional coding, then using that SQL query and just leveraging what SQL can do for you should be able to get what you want.
Got it. All right, I will play with that.
Ask not what SQL can do for you, but what you can do for SQL.
So this is the little token that I had shared with Don, and it explicitly casts it as a date time and then is trying to apply a format. And what I'm thinking oh no, it's not, that's not that one. What was the name of the one that I sent?
Reformat.
It was reformat.
Yeah. Let's see. Tokens, MBI, reformat date.
Really? Okay, because this one doesn't look quite okay. Point is that it's doing it explicitly as a date time, and I suspect, based on what Ben said, that if this word was changed to date time offset, that it might work as well.
One other question, and I'm really confused now because you said the local date time is going to store it locally. I know that the SQL Server, well, I guess that's the question. I don't know that the SQL Server is set right. It's supposed to be, but the time is popping up as 5 a.m. So in the daytime picker, I choose 12:01 a.m. and save that. And then I come over into another form and go and read that same record and display it. And it's 5:01 a.m. No reformatting, just show me what's in that field. So the local date and time is no different to me than the date and time. So does that mean that the SQL Server date and time is set wrong?
You'd have to do a SQL select statement on that table and see what the time zone value is popping up as with the field that you're storing, and make sure that it's matching your time zone.
If I understood that correctly, I do a SQL for the table that I'm storing, or do I do a SQL?
Yeah,
okay.
just a simple select statement like in the SQL console.
Yeah.
So select star from app dot whatever your table name is.
Yep.
And then look at the value that's being stored in that field. And at the end of that date, you'll see the time zone information. It'll say like minus or plus, and then some number. You have to make sure that that is your time zone information. If it isn't, then it could be that your SQL Server is set to be a different time zone.
Got it. And I'm doing just that, and it is showing me 5:01 a.m. or 5:01, 05:01. So
right, but what is the time zone information?
+0.
So it's saving it as UTC. +0 is UTC time.
So the local date time. All right, maybe the problem is that I use the entity builder. Here's where this may be confusing, I guess. When you use the entity builder, it automatically generates a grid and a form for you on a page. And I use those for myself, but I don't use those for the customer. So I went and created a second page, exported the form, and then imported it on that other page. Now that I've gone and changed the entity, do I need to do that export and import again? Or because now what's it actually, it's still reading the entity. The action is still reading the entity.
Isn't there a grid on the grid? Isn't there a format time as local time for that column now that it's coming back in a different format?
A second field.
The problem that you're seeing, is it in your form or is it in the grid?
he's not working with an automatically generated form. He's working with a form that he copied from one of ours.
But I could certainly go back to the one that you generated. Now that that's happened, I went and changed that out, and let me go and look at what you generated to see if your value is different than mine. And it is. Yours says 12:01 a.m. So I think the issue is that I need to export and then import, or do I just have to resave?
No, no, not just resave. The characteristics of the form that we've added for you automatically has a setup for start date, and you would want to copy. For example, I'm working on it here now. We have the form got generated, and it has this date time picker field. You'd want to copy the characteristics of that into your custom form if you
okay,
or explore this to see why. So it's probably uncheck is UTC and say format it as a particular format. Another possible, rather than using a token, earlier you were talking about reading it in and using a token and whatever, but you can just display it on the page, right? So using this formatting with a form, you can use the date time picker to display it for you, right?
Oh, yes. If I was displaying the form, what I'm doing is in the events area, if it's too early to show the form, I give an error right there. So I'd never get to the displaying the form.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could show it as a form field and redo the logic, but then every other field I have to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it that way. That's why I figured just a simple error message at the beginning is easier. But yeah, since yours is showing it correctly, I think the solution for me is to just go back to that management form and
see what's different or regenerate
and see what's different between the two.
Okay. I want to close a loop on one that we had from last week. That's the one that I had in my pocket. Matt had an issue, and we figured it out offline after the fact. But the issue was that he had a nice form, he hit diagnostics, and if the diagnostics would show all the values of the fields, when you look at the design of it, the diagnostics button, he had it not doing validation, but he discovered if it is set to validation, then with that one change, and let me just let that save, with that one change, the form would no longer save correctly. The diagnostic button wouldn't work. And I'm going to go ahead and inspect, because he discovered as well that there was an error on the network tab that was confusing. So we'll reset this and click the button, and it was getting a 500 error. So this was the problem that we were taking a look at last week and couldn't quite get through. He sent me the form, and I tore it all apart, which is easy to do on a repro system, right? But I just started deleting things until it started to work, and I noticed that when I deleted the add user button, that it started to work, which caused me then to dig into what's going on in the add user button. So this is a case where there's a problem with add user button, and it doesn't really manifest in a way that it's pointing you to where is the problem or how to fix it. The add user button that he has is designed is set up to show conditionally based on the value of isEdit. IsEdit is being generated on pre-init. I think we're going to see it. Yeah, it gets a value of false here in the pre-init, and probably, yeah, it goes to true depending on something else. But on pre-init only exists in that moment before the form renders and as the form is rendering. And so once you get to the point where you have the form and you're clicking the button, anything that existed in pre-init is long gone. And so it was enough to let the form render, but it wasn't there when he was pushing the button. We we have a custom, a normal solution to this problem is that you can place a hidden field with a custom value. You can name it something, and in our case, we name it as h_isEdit, and we push the value of h_isEdit gets initialized with isEdit. So this then becomes a field on the form that persists forever and is available when the button renders. Isn't that fun? Anyway, short solution is you put in h_isEdit, so it's pointing to this field instead of that thing that doesn't exist after the fact. And the button starts to work and no longer generates an error. So I think this would be a ghost story.
Good catch, Dale.
Dale, I recognize that.
You recognize what?
The story.
Yeah.
I had to put my headset down. I apologize. You probably were talking about it.
I was. Yep. So now the button works and does just exactly what it says. And notice, of course, he was dumping the field values, and h_isEdit is true. It has a value and can be processed. I
think. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it would be. I don't know how we can improve the product.
Yeah.
So that those kinds of things, the fact that you used something here that existed at the time of the original rendering of the button, but doesn't exist after the fact. I don't know how we can better detect and not throw errors.
I was going to say basically the same thing, Dale. Just adding that this is one that I see pretty regularly, in support type stuff, and it's a classic form lifecycle thing, and the fact that the button just does nothing when you click it is really challenging sometimes it's really challenging to track down, especially if you have a very complex form with lots of fields and buttons and stuff. It's sometimes challenging to track down. Okay, so where is that issue? And I wish there was a way we could make it easier to tell the low-code engineer exactly what's happening.
This is something that I've experienced more often than not. I've learned, not to use pre-init based values in those locations. But here's my question. Why is show conditionally being re-evaluated at postback? That's my question, because logically speaking, it shouldn't be.
That's the same question.
That's what bind is for.
Mm-hmm.
So my personal opinion, and sorry, my opinion, personal opinion is all opinions are personal. But my view on it is that show conditionally is only supposed to be running at the time the form is initially loaded, and then it should never be run again.
Perhaps
unless you reinitialize the form. If you reinitialize the form, I could see you running that again. But at that point, anything in pre-init will exist again because you're reinitializing from beginning. But at time of hitting any button for submit, it should not be reevaluating show conditionally. It should be only evaluating the bind versions.
And on the
Um,
surface, I would agree with you. I don't know if there is actually a reason that we're doing it that way, or whether it's a state of affairs.
Yeah, I don't understand either, but also I mean, look, maybe we've already looked at this, but it is stated right there, right where you have your cursor, just on the line above that. This is evaluated both initially and after submit, in the text below the show condition.
Yeah. So
It
we
says
we
it.
we know
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's an issue.
Well, why? Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've wondered the same thing, Ben, and I haven't.
And this one is the same issue, really. If you were to if we were to move that down there, it would blow up as well. And that I'll point out in our big story of redoing the way that tokens works, the way the form admins look, like we've done in automation and APIs. Now we're working on workflows. Someday we're going to get to form builder. In that we have context. We have variables that we sense what variables are in context, and if they're not created, we can error or warn or whatever. And I would say that if there's a reason that we're keeping this, we should also sense in things like buttons that variables that come from pre-init should not be available in a button show conditionally. Right. So I think when we get smart about this, we could warn about it or prevent it. And but I go back to asking Ben's question: should we be doing it at all?
I just want to add one little thing, because you reminded me about something when you said enable conditionally. One of the errors that I've seen quite often in this particular situation is an error that'll come up that says the button is not enabled.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, you have nothing in enable conditionally. That is a prime indicator that your show conditionally evaluation, there's something wrong with it. That there's a value most likely that you have in there that is causing the show conditional statement to fail. When that fails, you'll get an error saying the button is not enabled. That's another thing that I've seen happen quite often. But it just reminded me when you said enable conditionally, I was like, that's the error that I've seen quite often. And I look it back and I'm like, but I don't have anything in enable conditionally. It's always enabled. And then that's when it dawned on me, and I'm like, oh, my show conditionally has, a bad token in there.
Now I'm interested to see if we do this mistake intentionally for enable conditionally, how it's going to render. Whatever it's going to do slowly. Okay, we got a button. I'm going to bring this up just so that in case something happens. And that doesn't blow up. Where I go? That's the one. Yep. I don't know. All right, we'll leave this in a working state. With that, we've hit our hour, and so I am going to invite anyone who would like to hang around for our Afterglow segment, which is where the recording is off and the virtual beverages are raised high. Do join us. But thanks for being here for this episode, and we will be here again next Friday. Thanks.